Hello, this is Chris Heasley with the Chris Heasley Radio Show. On this show, we regularly advocate for activism at the local level. We advocate for taking back our communities at the local level, taking back our school boards, our county commissioners' courts, our Texas State House of Representatives. Because these groups that should be reporting to us, they have been hijacked. The billionaire class, the European billionaire class, the globalists have sprinkled money over the Texas Democrat Party for the past 2 decades, and they've attained ownership of Texas Democrats. So your Texas Democrats no longer report to you, but rather they report to the interests of men like Klaus Schwab, like George Soros, like Michael Bloomberg. And these men are not good men. They're not well-intentioned men. We're truly living in a James Bond type of movie where there is a billionaire villain intending to take over the world. That's what we are up against right now. And that billionaire class is employing the Texas Democrats to do their dirty work. And so now it is up to you. It is up to you to take back your community by becoming active and involved at the local level, because at the local level, you get the most bang for your buck. And we have the greatest chance of success if you begin taking back your local state governments. But the Texas Democrats completely oppose everything that I say. They disagree with everything that I say. And so what we will do today, what we will do on this show, is we will bring you their perspective. And then we will bring you the opposing perspective. And if you agree with our perspective, then we're asking you to pick up the phone and begin calling your Texas Democrats and setting them straight. And we will start this off we will show you a quote by Gina Hinojosa. Gina Hinojosa is a Texas Democrat out of Austin. She's a state House representative out of District 49, and she's a Texas Democrat of the Austin area. And what she says right here sums up, it embodies everything about Texas Democrats today. And I will quote her now. Quote, "We are blessed with great candidates, but the power we use to win is not for them. It is for us. Because as much as I admire Biden's investments in clean energy, his crackdown on corporate greed and monopolies, his skill at securing a bipartisan gun safety law, those victories are not about him. Those victories are about us. They make our lives better. They give my kids better opportunities. They give your kids better opportunities. They give us a chance to grow on a livable planet. They make our communities safer. I am using my power to elect Democrats and to elect Joe Biden, not because I love him. He's great. But I am voting for Joe Biden because I love my kids, because I love my community, because I love me. And there is no better investment we can make in ourselves or in our future than turning Texas blue." Unquote. Gina Hinojosa, Texas House Rep out of District 49, the Austin, Texas area, and a Texas Democrat. And that quote right there, again, it sums up everything about the Texas Democrat. That is her plea to you, to vote for the Texas Democrats, to turn the state of Texas blue. And so on today's show, what we will do is we will break down every part of that quote, and we will talk about the Texas Democrats' agenda and how it affects you personally. And this is the Chris Heasley Show. And on this show, we give you all the ideas, the content, the information that you need to take back your cities, your countries, your town. But again, once we give that to you, it is on you. It is on you to get involved and begin making the moves to take back your local county governments. And on today's show, we have on the show, our guest is G2. G2 is a freedom fighter. He is a freedom activist in the Midwest and in the Philly coast area. And he's on the line now. G2, are you there?
I am.
Good to be with you. Good to hear you, G2. Glad for calling in. Thank you for calling in.
Good afternoon.
Oh, man. So I just gave you Gina Hinojosa's quote. Do you want to say anything off the cuff before we dig into the heart of the matter with regard to the quote that I just read from Gina Hinojosa?
All right. So this is a really interesting speech because, in fact, there's nothing of substance in it. You don't have any data. You don't have any major issues being addressed. It really says very little. So what is it about? It's really about feeding an emotional feeling among the people that somehow Joe Biden and this Democrat Party are doing things that are just good for you, but we're not going to tell you specifically what. We'll mention a couple of things, right? But basically it says they make our lives better. They give my kids better opportunities. Well, how? How are they giving your children better opportunities? So when you look at it, it's actually quite a fraudulent statement, but it's just nice, flowery language designed to get you to just feel good about her and the party she's part of. But let's talk about what that party's actually doing. You know, child trafficking in this country has gone from something that was a major fight under the Trump administration, where arrests for child trafficking went up substantially, and the Trump administration used the Marshal Service to go out and begin rescuing not one child at a time, but large groups at a time. When the Trump administration was taken out of office and the Biden Democrat administration was put in place, suddenly there was not a lot more talk about fighting child trafficking, and we know that millions and millions of foreign nationals have come into this country, and that many hundreds of thousands of those are what they call unaccompanied minors. Well, what is an unaccompanied minor? Are you telling me that there are 5-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 7-year-olds, and 2-year-olds that are leaving their home in Guatemala and Yemen and in Brazil, in Argentina, Venezuela, and they're saying, listen, I'm only 7, but I'm going to pack my lunch pail and go off to the United States because that's where I want to grow up. It's a preposterous idea to believe that there's some such thing as an unaccompanied minor. We know that every single person that crosses that border has got to pay a fee to the cartels. Now, why would the Democrats hand control of our border to the cartels? Why would they allow hundreds of thousands of children to be trafficked into this country, to be used for labor in some cases, and in many cases to be used in what can only be politely described as sexual exploitation? So this woman is saying the Democrats and Joe Biden and this Democrat Party is implementing policies that are giving my family a better future, when in fact they're implementing policies that have taken child trafficking to an industrial scale and have taken the industry from, say, a $9 billion a year industry to a much bigger industry here in the United States. So behind this flowery, nebulous, kind of soft and pretty language is a landscape of horrors that have been put upon the American people. Now, that's child trafficking, a very, very dark and evil thing. But even when you look at inflation, we've seen the price of housing climb at a much faster rate than income. Well, when Donald Trump was president, we saw incomes grow at a faster rate than the rate of inflation, meaning average American families made more money. They were more prosperous. And now, ever since the Democrats took power, that prosperity has been taken away. And how's it been done? It's been done by the government creating regulations that drive up, for example, the cost of energy, by increasing fees and reducing exploration. And we've seen them, of course, print trillions and trillions of dollars, now incurring $2 trillion a year deficits that are expected to continue on to the future with no abatement ever. Now, to be fair, Democrats don't do that alone. The Republicans aren't doing enough to fight these deficits, this wild, wasteful, and theft-driven spending, right? This is corruption on a scale the world's not seen in modern times. But it is the Democrats that are pushing this agenda. They are the ones in control. So you're telling me what in this flowery language? That your kids are somehow going to have a better future because housing's no longer within affordability that allows them to buy a home, and because they now are going to spend so much on their food, fuel, and energy budget that they're not going to have the ability to ever begin investing at a level that their parents and grandparents did so they can catch up with inflation. So the final conclusion, when you listen to these sort of nebulous, silly speeches by people like this Democrat activist, it's clear. She's trying to cast a polite, pleasant, uplifting, positive spin on what is a very destructive set of policies that have harmed this nation. So that's my take on it.
We're in deep water. And it's very hard to find that out because the corporate media, they have no credibility any longer, but they still fill that space. They still fill that space where they're just pumping out the propaganda, their nonsense, and we haven't had a credible source to fill that space. And so when you hear G2's response to Gina Hinojosa, we're filling in that gap. Gina Hinojosa's nonsense exists because the corporate media is confusing. It's purposely confusing everybody. So we're filling in that gap to allow the citizens of Texas, of Fort Bend and Harris counties, to get the content they need to begin confronting your Texas Democrats. And, when you confront a Democrat with information, with facts and figures, they run. It's like kryptonite to them. They can't take it. They run. It's like a cross to a vampire. They can't take it. And so we're asking everyone in the listening audience, take notes today and then begin calling Texas Democrats. Call your county commissioners. Call your county Texas state rep. Your Texas state reps. But what I want to do is, okay, so G2 he really gave a summation of a proper response, what should be a proper address of the Texas Democrat Party. But what I want to do is break down this quote bit by bit. And so we're going to go ahead and just start with the very first sentence of Gina Hinojosa's comments in her public speech this weekend, where she summed up the positions of the Texas Democrat Party. And I'm going to start this quote over again from the beginning. This is Gina Hinojosa. Quote, "We are blessed with great candidates, but the power we use to win is not for them. It is for us. Period." Unquote. I'm going to stop right there with the very first two sentences. And I think what a strategy that they have is to make their statements purposely confusing. It's called something intellectual jargon or something of that sort. It's where the academics, the supposed intellects, they use purposefully confusing terms to say nothing. And that sentence makes no sense to me. We are blessed with great candidates, but the power we use to win is not for them. It is for us. She is a candidate. What is she talking about? So I think right there, she's attempting to just, put on a pretty face and trip up the listener and confuse them. She's not being straightforward. G2, what do you think? That's a tactic.
It is a tactic. It's a tactic to consistently distract everyone so that they really have no ability to track what these Democrats are doing. Always moving away from facts, always twisting the numbers, and then adding this sort of emotionally triggering language designed to make you feel emotionally happy. Most people don't have time to read and break down a speech like this. They hear it, it embeds, and they move on. We spend a lot of time breaking down the language, looking at what actually it means, what she's really saying, what it says behind the scenes. But average people don't do that. Normal Americans just don't spend that much time on something as insignificant as a speech like this. So she gets applause, she walks off stage, and everybody around the room, pats each other on the back. But it is insidious because the issues this woman should be addressing are issues that she and her party have put forward.
G2, man, I think the proper term for Texas Democrats is snake oil salesmen, con artists. It's a con game. It's a con job. They are the professionals. They are the experts at it. They are incredibly talented in that way. But I think it's time to begin using proper language and confronting them with proper language, proper terms, proper English. And in my opinion, the right term to use to refer to Texas Democrats is con artist or snake oil salesman. I want to move on to the next sentence. I'm going to start again from the beginning because I'm only going to go one more sentence deeper. Again, Gina Hinojosa. Gina Hinojosa, here we go. Quote, "We are blessed with great candidates, but the power we use to win is not for them, it is for us. Because as much as I admire Biden's investments in clean energy," I'm going to stop right there, unquote. I admire Biden's investments in clean energy. And so I pulled some interesting facts on that. And I'm going to respond now to Gina Hinojosa's claims that Biden is investing in clean energy. He's not investing in clean energy. He's throwing money away. He is wasting whatever money that we have left in our pocketbook after the Democrats have taken it all. They are just putting through the paper shredder. They are spending money that doesn't need to be spent. They're stealing from the citizens on these boondoggles. And on a recent Tucker episode, he had Willie Soon. Willie Soon is a Malaysian aerospace engineer, and more importantly, he is a climate change denier. And you know what? I'm a climate change denier too. I will take that title proudly. Thank you very much. But here's what he said with regard to clean energy. I want people to quantify this, okay? Here is Willie Soon. Quote, "They want to triple the amount of solar and wind power. This is a sad story. Of the amount that we spend that we can document, some 3.6 trillion, they spend 2 trillion on solar and wind. And in doing so, they account for only 3% of the world power. 85% of the world's power is from fossil fuels, hydropower, and nuclear," unquote. Willie Soon. Okay, so what Willie is saying there is that I don't know if that's a national number or a global number, because he was sort of addressing things from a global level. We'll break that down in a second. But he said $3.6 trillion is spent on, on energy in general. 3.6 trillion spent on energy in general. Of that, 2 trillion is spent on solar and wind, when solar and wind only bring in 3% of your energy. So, I mean, we could take that 3.6 trillion number and bring it down to 1.6 trillion. He went on to make a comment about nuclear and the great efficiencies that are in nuclear power. But what he said that they do here in America, he said that on the world stage, the other countries are blowing us away on nuclear power because they see the efficiencies there. But in America, what the leftists do is they just completely smother. Anytime anyone wants to get a nuclear power plant going, they are smothered with red tape so that the costs go off the charts and they can't get it done, because it would completely destroy their dreams of a solar and wind world. And he says that it costs 1,000 times more to get a nuclear power plant started in the United States than it does in Korea. Okay, so they're purposely sabotaging any chance of getting us out from underneath this boondoggle of their solar and wind scam. G2, what do you think?
Well, look, this energy attack has been disastrous for the United States. If you think about what's happened from in the perspective of energy here in the United States, we are going through this shift to the highest cost, least reliable systems, solar, wind, away from the lowest cost, most reliable systems, coal, nuclear, natural gas, generation of power. And while we're doing that, they're building data centers all over the country. Those data centers are going to pull huge amounts of energy. As they implement AI systems in giant corporations and even small businesses, AI is going to be a major consumer of energy. And at the same time, they've brought in 15 million people, 10 to 15 million people illegally. We don't know where they are. We don't know who they are. We don't know why they're here. We don't know how they got the money to pay the cartels. But you know what we do know? We know they're going to use a lot of electricity, just like we do. So what you're doing here is simultaneously increasing the demand for energy. And, of course, I've left off electric cars. They're increasing demand for electricity, for power, while they are driving up the cost of that power and putting us into a grid that is not at all prepared not to handle that increase in demand, or even to deliver the base loads we need now on a consistent basis from low-cost, reliable sources. This is national suicide. It's absolutely national suicide. When you look at the dependency we have on oil and gas and our ability to produce it, because of the high cost of oil right now, the high price for oil, the high price for natural gas, we're producing more oil today than ever in American history. The problem is our rig counts aren't that high. Our exploration isn't happening at the same level. If you look at what the Biden administration did when they released new leases for some federal land a few months ago, they did that with the smallest number of new lease permits in history. So that's a problem. Now, there's one more element. If you go back, say, 10 years, we did not export energy. If you pump natural gas into the United States, it went into our pipelines, into these caves where it's stored, and then it went into consumption. But now we could ship it into LNG ports, that's liquid natural gas ports, where we could ship it off to Europe. That increases demand, and that gives us now exposure to the world price market at a much higher level than we had before. There's the midst of building more ports to export petroleum, to export energy. So we are simultaneously increasing our demand, increasing our export infrastructure, and reducing the reliability and increasing the cost of our system. It's national suicide. Now, who would do such a thing? Well, people who are going to profit from implementing these new technologies. How do they do that? The government is issuing huge amounts of subsidies and grants for all of this electrification of our existing products. In California, they're saying you can't have gas-powered lawnmowers and lawn tools. You can't have natural gas stoves anymore. They're moving you to completely electric-based energy use. And they're forcing it. And at the same time, they're issuing massive grants for building out car charging stations, for building out these solar farms and these wind farms. Now, these wind farms and solar farms are not the environmental win that we're told they are. In fact, they have quite a bleak economic and environmental footprint. So that is what these folks are doing. Inevitably, because the quality of our lives, our lifestyle, our prosperity, our quality of life is dependent upon access to low-cost, easily accessed energy. Our ability to compete as an economy, and that it goes from industrial through tech and IT, AI, everything. Our ability to compete is based on access to low-cost, readily available energy. They're making us more vulnerable, less competitive, and reducing our lifestyles by switching this energy footprint, and they're making billions of dollars out of the government trough doing it. It's an insidious move that they're making. And if we don't stop it, it is going to cost the American people tremendously in the future. It's not just financial costs. It will be a reduction of our business competitiveness globally, and it'll reduce our lifestyle, our quality of life. Now, what are our competitors doing? Well, in China, they're building coal-fired power plants as fast as they can get them built. Last year, they were building 2 a week. You've got nuclear facilities being built in some countries. Other countries are not marching down this path toward national suicide. Other countries are expanding their access to low-cost, reliable, easy-access electricity, including the base load you have to have just to run your society, let alone the peak access. The best way to get to peakers, to have peak energy supply, are through gas-fired turbines. Well, let me ask you, if you need extra energy and the wind isn't blowing or the windmill is simply not working, what do? Well, if you have gas-fired turbines, you flip a switch and immediately power up some turbines. You don't have that ability with solar. You don't have that ability with wind. So this is a fundamentally stupid, self-destructive move for the nation, but it is a move that is very, very profitable for those who have their beak in the government trough.
Well, I want to take that idea a step further, and where we're questioning their intentions. I think it's time for Americans to start being cynical and accusatory towards the Texas Democrats, because what we just heard, that there's a financial incentive in it, But okay, if you look at Sun Tzu in The Art of War, Sun Tzu would say he would have his opponents defeated before his armies would even be mounted on their horses. And he did it through preliminary tactics to weaken the country from within. And then what he would do, one of the things he would do is he would find traitorous politicians within his enemies' camps that would work on his behalf. This is Sun Tzu, The Art of War. There is no logical reason that exists to promote wind and power in the way that they do. None. None at all. And I think it's time that we start to question their intentions and start to ask the question, are they acting on behalf of foreign interests? Are they acting on behalf of foreign adversaries? Are they operatives? And can we throw the word out there, treason? Is that happening right now? I think that's where this conversation needs to go. And we don't know, right? But I think the question needs to be answered. I think we need to ask them that question. Who you working for here, Gina Hinojosa? Who are you representing? Because it's clear you're not representing the people of Harris County, the people of Fort Bend County, the people of the state of Texas. Who exactly are you taking your orders from? I think we need to go down that road. Did you have anything else you want to say on that, or should we move on to the next talking point of Gina Hinojosa?
Well, there are a couple of examples where we see numbers that don't make any sense at all. There was a recent discussion, again, of the oft-discussed Clinton. You know, the Clintons say they left the White House with little money. They've never done much outside of public service. They've never had a job in the private sector. They didn't build a company with a multi-billion-dollar empire. They didn't do that. And yet somehow they're worth $100 million because they had the Clinton Foundation and they were government people. How did that happen? When you ask yourself, does anybody really think that leaving the southern border open is good for the nation? Nobody believes they're doing something that's helpful to the average American citizen. Nobody thinks they're increasing our national security. Everyone knows that the cartels aren't just delivering cheap labor for large multinationals to keep wages down in the United States. Everyone knows that in that group, there are people with nefarious intent from foreign countries. When you see tens of thousands coming from China, paying fees somewhere between $10,000 and $20,000 to the cartel per person, and if you look down along the path that they take from Ecuador to the United States, the Chinese can fly into Ecuador without a visa, and then they hook up with the cartels and come along through the Darien Gap and up to the southern border of the United States, and the cartels deliver them to the U.S. The Chinese Communist Party has set up supply depots along that path. Do you think the federal officials that are facilitating this don't know about it? There's a camp down in the Darien Gap called Camp China, where all the Chinese people, all the Chinese migrants came through. Well, somehow that camp ended up burning, and all the records of who those people were are gone. So we've got tens of thousands of military-aged men who appear very fit, who have been brought up from Ecuador through the Darien Gap and up along the migrant route into the United States, and we have no idea what they're doing here. Now, do you really think the federal government believes that that's somehow making the country safer, that the Department of Homeland Security believes that's fulfilling their mission? Of course not. So the question of why are you doing this, what are your motives, has got to be asked. It is naive to believe that these politicians and appointed government officials are allowing the cartels to make hundreds of millions of dollars a week, and none of that money is flowing into the hands of local, state, and national politicians. It's naive to believe that. So who's making money, and where are they making that money? And then you look at China. You look at Joe Biden's relationship with the Chinese Communist Party. Look at the firm called Rosemont Seneca. Look at the $1.5 billion invested in a private equity fund that was run by his son Hunter and John Kerry's son, whose last name is Hines. And you start to see that the financial interests of our elected officials are often aligned with our competitors like the Chinese Communist Party. The American people didn't give Joe Biden's kid $1.5 billion to manage. The CCP did. Who do you think he's loyal to?
It's evil brilliance. They weaken you from within. They weaken you until they can get that foreign army, the billion Chinese army in our port of Galveston. I know it's surreal and it's hard to imagine, but can anyone argue against it? Where is the logical extension of where we are going? It is a conquering of a people. It is a conquering of a people from within. It's a rotting of a country from the inside out. I want to challenge anyone. Find me one legitimate issue that the Democrats are representing that's in the interest of the American people. Find me one. They don't exist. They don't exist. They're opportunists. You are the asset that they are selling. They've got a number on your head. Corporation USA, there's a number on your head. You're the asset that the Texas Democrats are cashing in and selling and making money on and building their careers off of. And it's time that we get out of this comfort zone. We get into an uncomfortable zone because we never want to think about our local representatives are selling us out. It's time to get out of our comfort zone and begin realizing that that reality exists. And as long as we sit on our couches and do nothing about it, it continues. We have the political class outnumbered 10,000 to 1, and all we need to do is become politically active and involved. That's it. I want to move on to the next quote. So again, this is Gina Hinojosa talking about all the beautiful things under the Texas Democrats, all the great things that they're bringing you. And the next quote is, okay, she talks about how beautiful Joe Biden is and his investments in clean energy. And then she moves on to his crackdown on corporate greed and monopolies. I'm going to repeat that one more time. His crackdown on corporate greed and monopolies. Okay, Gina Hinojosa, Texas Democrat, Texas House State Rep out of Austin, Texas, is bragging about Joe Biden's skill at, his ability to crack down on corporate greed and monopolies. Now, okay, I want to explain to you a theory right now. So what we've had in the past year, the reason that everything under the sun has gone up in a hyperinflation mode since Joe Biden was elected, the past 4 years, we have an average rate of inflation that is around 46%. That's hyperinflation. And that number might be conservative, okay? Why is that happening? It's because of an institution called the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve sets interest rates. And when they set those interest rates, it is a foundational upward pressure on everything in your life, from a loaf of bread to a stick of gum to your rent to your mortgage to the taxes you have to pay on your house. It hits everything. We've had a hike over 40% in the past 4 years when incomes have not gone up. Okay, so this is what happened, and the Federal Reserve did it. Didn't have to happen. I don't think they like Americans, so they did it, okay? So the Federal Reserve does this, and at the same time, concurrently, the largest corporation in the world, it's called BlackRock. It sets up a fund. For when people default on their mortgages to be able to buy up those homes. It sets up a second fund to begin buying multi-unit properties. What does that mean? These things that I'm showing you, follow the dots. There's no way these things can be that they can just have happened, right? They can't just be a coincidence. This is evil brilliance playing out. The Federal Reserve is a Democrat Party aligned institution. Joe Biden gets in. The Federal Reserve raises interest rates. Everyone's cashing out. BlackRock knows this is happening. They set up a fund to buy homes for when you default, and then they will own all of our homes too. They already own all of our corporations. They're going to own all of our homes too. Then they set up another fund for when you default and you have to go to a one-bedroom apartment. They got a fund to build apartments for you. Oh, aren't they nice, right? We're going to take you out of your 4-bedroom, 3-bath house, put you in a 1-bedroom apartment. You're probably going to have your mother-in-law live with you, or your parents, because that's where we're going with this world. And it's all a coincidence. It's all a coincidence. Now, why weren't any of these things mentioned in Gina Hinojosa's statement? It's time to confront the Texas Democrats with these facts and figures that we're presenting you with. Why wasn't that mentioned in Gina Hinojosa's statement? Kind of odd, isn't it? Maybe because her hand's open for that BlackRock money too, right? I think she'd take a phone call from BlackRock before she'd take a phone call from you. G2, what do you think?
Well, when you talk about the Fed and their efforts to increase inflation, it is accurate to say that they're doing that. The Fed is a major buyer of U.S. Treasuries. People don't understand that the Fed, of course, is not part of the federal government. It is a separate institution owned privately by private banks and the ultra-wealthy. So the Fed, by buying U.S. Treasuries, is helping keep the price of U.S. Treasuries down, and it's helping the U.S. Treasury, the government, pump money into the economy. All of that is driving inflation. So on one hand, the Fed says they're raising interest rates to stop inflation. On the other hand, they're pumping money into the economy by buying these government bonds and working with the Treasury to constantly pump that money into the economy. Where's that money going? What's going to anybody that's aligned with the government? It's going to the pockets of anyone who's aligned with the party. So if you're going to go, say, drive their crazy green energy policy, then you might be able to get money. But if you're going to go off and say, no, I just want to study the impacts of certain things in energy without a goal of proving their case, you will not get a grant. So it is the Fed feeding the monster, and the monster using that money to expand its power and reach, and, of course, to make the people who are part of the machine, the political machine, the government machine, more wealthy. So what are they – why is she not talking about that? None of that's helpful to her. It's complicated. Most Americans aren't really following exactly what causes inflation. When they come out and talk about corporate greed and pretend that it's corporate greed causing inflation, many Americans will believe that because they haven't studied what drives inflation, and it's what elected officials are telling them. It's what the Democrat Party's telling them. It's what they're seeing on social media. So it is a really good strategy if you want to deceive the American people about the impact of your policies and the moves you're making that, in theory, you're making to help those people who your policies are harming.
There's a new theory coming out, and it's what would enslavement look like today, right? Of course, they could never put the chains on us like they once did. So what would a modern form of enslavement look like? And the concept is debt enslavement, where every action that you make in your life, every move that you make in your life, you are enslaved with debt. And why does this happen? This happens because the Federal Reserve has a debt-based currency. Debt-based currency. So every economy needs a currency. Every people, as a matter of life, you have to conduct commerce to live. And so in the current form that we have it, just for the practice of conducting exchange, you have to use a debt-based currency. You have to go into debt where you owe the Federal Reserve. By the way, the Federal Reserve is a private bank, most likely owned by the European billionaire class, most likely owned by a family called the Rothschilds. Who reports to the Rothschilds? Klaus Schwab reports to the Rothschilds. George Soros reports to the Rothschilds. These are the theories that are coming to the surface. And so just by you living your life, you are in debt. And then, right, so, then you turn 18, you're going into the world. What's the first thing they tell you to do? Go get a college loan. Go into debt. As they sell that to you as a matter of responsibility. Go get in debt. It's a good thing. Okay? And so why did that come up in Gina Hinojosa's speech? Right? Why doesn't that come in? No, man, because they are aligned with the corporate interests while they sit there and tell you that they are cracking down on corporate greed. It is complete nonsense. It is time to confront your Texas Democrat Party. We're going to move to the next part of her speech. This is Gina Hinojosa talking about all the beautiful flower things under the Texas Democrats. And she's talking about how great it is to be a Democrat. And she's talking about how great Joe Biden is. And I'm going to give the quote right now. Joe Biden is great because, quote, his skill at securing a bipartisan gun safety law, unquote. That's what we need right now, right? We have a border that is completely disheveled, right? Completely in shambles. We have military-aged men coming in, importing a human trafficking practice. And Gina Hinojosa is stumping for gun control, for gun confiscation. By the way, gun control, let's just do the translation. It means gun confiscation. That's what they want. They don't want gun control. They want gun confiscation. So I want you to think about this, right? All these little ladies we have in Texas are Texas women, right? They come out of the Home Depot and they're walking to their trucks, right? And when you walk to your truck, you could be totally covered up because that thing's like a wall, right? You come or Home Depot or coming out of the any grocery store, H-E-B, whatever, coming out, you get in your truck, all of a sudden another truck full of cartel members comes up on the other side, blocks your other side, and she's gone Gone. It's called human trafficking. You're at the convenience store. You look away from your child for a minute. Boom, child's gone in the back of a cartel member's car, heading down 59 South for the Texas border to a world that you can't imagine, and you can't do anything about it, right? And what Gina Hinojosa's response to that is, oh, well, we need more gun laws. So we need our Texas people to be able to defend themselves in this lawless world that is being imposed on us by the Texas Democrats. But Gina Hinojosa thinks that you need to be disarmed while our world crumbles. G2, what do you think?
Mexico has fantastic gun control laws. The Mexican laws say that the average citizen can't own a firearm. And yet the murder rate in Mexico is astronomical. At one point, I don't know when this was, 10 years ago, they had something like 34,000 people in morgues that they couldn't identify. There are open gun battles in Mexico between the federales and the cartels. Sometimes, in one case, about 2 years ago, an open gun battle went for a year and a half. 3 hours. The only people in Mexico that aren't armed are the people, the average citizen, who is completely powerless to defend themselves. So the cartels reign supreme. They can go anywhere without fear of any retribution by a citizen. The government, of course, is free to do whatever it wishes because it has no fear of its citizens. People have to understand that when the Constitution was written, it was written to continuously to give the American people a protection against the tendency toward tyranny. All governments tend toward tyranny. It's what they do. It's natural. It's the nature of humans, and the nature of humans hasn't changed. The purpose of the Second Amendment is to give the government pause before it implements tyrannical policy. If that is stripped away, there's no doubt that this radicalized government that does not operate in the interest of our people will become tyrannical. It's tyrannical in many ways now. So it is essential that the Second Amendment be continued. Now, when you look at the actual violence happening in cities, there are more rapes than there are deaths by guns. There are more deaths by strangulation and hands and feet than there are by guns, more by blunt instruments than guns. And yet all we ever hear about is gun violence, a very term designed to make us think that guns are bad and that guns bring violence. The reason we have violence in our communities is because we have a cultural problem. Introducing these cartels will not make us safer. And now you've got Venezuelan cartels that are showing up in places like Chicago, New York, where they never had a presence. So you are making our communities less safe. You're increasing the need for us to be able to defend ourselves. And at the same time, the Democrats are saying we should all be disarmed. They won't disarm the criminals. That's shown in Venezuela, Mexico, and everywhere else they've done this. They only end up disarming the average citizen. It is a ridiculous premise, and they pump the fear-mongering all the time to try to make that make sense. It just doesn't make sense.
So I'd just like to give a quick, brief statement that if you'd like to support this message, you can inbox me or you can inbox Radio FM 99.5 to Bang, their Facebook page. We are accepting advertisement sponsors right now. Just want to put that in there real quick before we get back to Gina Hinojosa's brilliance. Okay, so moving on to the next point, G2, and I appreciate everything that you just said. Let's get back to some confusing word speak. All right, so her next point of her sentence is, quote, "Those victories are not about him. Those victories are about us. They make our lives better. They give my kids better opportunities. They give your kids better opportunities. Period." I'm going to stop right there. That sentence makes no sense at all. That's another one where she is attempting to trip up the viewer, trip up the listening audience. She has nothing to say. She's a con artist. She's a snake oil salesman. She wants you confused so that your intellectual faculties are not working, so that you don't understand her real intentions. I want to read it again. Just I want to see if I got this right. Quote, "Those victories are not about him. Those victories are about us. They make our lives better." Period. I'm going to stop right there. That makes no sense. Does that make any sense? G2, what do you think?
No, it doesn't make sense. And here's the good news, because there is a lot of good news right now. what's happening in the American populace is that the people are waking up and beginning to realize these policies have driven so much pain financially into the American family that American families are starting to react to that. The people who live in communities that have been transitioned to appearing like third world countries are beginning to recognize that the invasion isn't helping them. The people who have lost children, remember, we're losing more than 100,000 Americans a year to heroin and fentanyl, all delivered by the cartels. And, of course, the fentanyl comes to the cartels from the Chinese Communist Party. The American people are waking up because they're seeing this pain. And we're starting to see a huge amount of momentum in a new direction. And it's not just in the United States. We're seeing momentum, for example, in Europe that we haven't seen in many, many years. Europe has been dominated by the same leftists that have been attacking the United States and control our government. If you look at what happened in France, France had an election, and 31.5% of the EU vote went to this group called the National Rally. That forced their president, Macron, to dissolve his national parliament. In Germany, a patriot party has become the second largest party, while the leftist parties are sinking. In Belgium, the prime minister resigned after being defeated in the elections. Now, Belgium has been on this march to the left for many, many years. They've implemented the same policies that our politicians are implementing here, and it's been a disaster for their people. In Italy, Prime Minister Meloni's brother of Italy wins in a historic landslide. There's a constant shift toward patriotic, nationalistic groups who think they do have a right to protect the interests of their own citizens, their own people, their own nation. Same in Austria, Spain, Luxembourg, and on and on. So we're seeing that in foreign countries. In the United States, of course, what we saw in the reaction to the ridiculous litigation against Donald Trump over the valuation of Mar-a-Lago was a lot of people in New York saying, wait a minute, this law, this criminal case you brought, this doesn't make any sense. They're saying there's bad law here because what has happened is you've set precedent where if a government bureaucrat is unhappy with someone, they can go back many, many years into their history, bring up an old transaction that all parties were happy with. Remember, the banks testified on behalf of Trump in the case on the valuation of Mar-a-Lago, saying, we did our own valuation work. There's no crime here. There's no offense here. No one was harmed here. The government ignored that because they didn't care whether anyone was harmed. This was a political case, but the American people have seen it. So as Trump was convicted in that case, suddenly people began to move his direction. We began to see increases in popularity and support for Donald Trump. That was not expected by the leftists and totalitarianists who are doing this. Then there were the 34 counts that have something to do with a non-disclosure agreement and Stormy Daniels. The media believed, and the press, the leftists believed, the Democrat Party believed that would be the end of the candidate. Remember, their goal is that you don't have a choice in November. They decide for you who will be on the ballot. But when this case broke, and everybody understands what it is, not everyone, but the vast majority of Americans do, and suddenly in the black American community, and now even among billionaires, we're seeing increased support for Donald Trump. That is the people beginning to say, we do not accept the destruction of our nation. We do not accept these radical policies that are harming our families. We don't accept grooming our children in public schools. We don't accept these things. And we are going to vote to change them. This is a monumental shift. Remember, after that last conviction, this 34 criminal counts that no one can understand or describe, Trump has raised about $400 million. Of his small dollar donations, which is more than $200 million now, 30% of them have never donated to a campaign before. There is a massive surge of support for a change in our national policy. It's an exciting time. It's great to see the American people finally understanding what's being done to them, what's being done to their nation, and finally saying, I'm going to stand up and say no more.
You know, it's funny. Gina Hinojosa Texas Democrat state rep out of Austin, she did not mention that President Trump raised $400 million over the weekend. I find that, isn't that kind of odd that she didn't mention the $400 million being raised for Donald Trump over the weekend? That's interesting that part was left out of the speech. Maybe she's going to get to that in her next public comments.
Well, it's a great point. This fundraising by Donald Trump has the leftists and the Democrats, all of America's enemies, in a real tizzy. They are quite concerned. They didn't expect it. They planned for this case to take him off the ballot. They thought this is where people would turn away, and it hasn't happened. They don't know what to do about it. If you listen to some of their people like Bill Maher's now saying, hey, stop pursuing the children, stop doing stop being as radical, at least until the election. Do what you want after the election if the leftists win again. But Bill Maher is saying it. James Carville, the famous advisor that helped Bill Clinton get elected, is in a state of panic. They're losing ground with Hispanic, with Black Americans, with the young, all demographics that they used to count on and never had to worry about or do anything to serve. They just counted on those votes coming, and they always came. Suddenly, those votes are moving away from them.
Well, there's been an overturning in the Texas Republican Party, and in the Republican Party, there was the establishment, the Karl Rove, George Bush element that's been completely overturned by a new group, which is more of a Trump supporting group, more of a Freedom Caucus type of group. And this just happened in the recent past one or two elections. And when you hear Texas Democrats talk about it, they talk about this new incoming class of Texas Republicans with fear. They miss the old Republicans that were ready to shake the hand across the aisle and do business. So this really is an incredible time. And it really puts exposure on representatives like Gina Hinojosa. I want to jump back. We got time for one more of her bullet points. We're not even getting through all of her nonsense in this one paragraph. We're tearing it up, but I'm going to jump back to one last point here. We'll get through one more. Okay, so Gina Hinojosa, Texas House Rep, District 49, Texas Democrat, talking about all the beautiful, wonderful things that Democrats bring to the people of Texas. And she says this: the Texas Democrats and Joe Biden gives Texans a chance to grow up on a livable planet. That's Gina Hinojosa saying that we have a livable planet thanks to Texas Democrats. Okay, so I want to bring everyone's attention to something called the Nord Stream pipeline. The Nord Stream pipeline was a pipeline in Europe. It sends critical, essential natural gas to the European continent from Russia. And what happened is that the Biden administration, Joe Biden, and his representatives said that pipeline is going away. Why did he say it? Because that pipeline takes money to Russia. Okay, and so as we know, Texas Democrats, they do not like Russians. They don't like Russians because Russians, like Americans, are Russia first. Americans are America first. Russians are Russians first. We all disagree. We reject the globalist agenda, and that does not sit well with Texas Democrats. And so what happened is they said, hey, that pipeline's going to blow up. It's going to go, or they said it's going to go away is what they said, right? And what do you know? In a act of terrorism, the greatest act of terrorism since the 9/11, an act of terrorism that can only be conducted by a first world government happens, and the Nord Stream pipeline blows up, and it just spews toxins into the air. So I want to give you just a couple of bullet points on exactly how bad it was. And I'm reading this from an article. Researchers say that it's the largest ever release of potential greenhouse gas during a single event, with an impact similar to annual emissions of 1 million cars. The gas could be seen rising to the surface of the ocean. The Nord Stream incident could signal an ominous geopolitical trend. It is estimated 300,000 metric tons of methane gas were sent into the atmosphere. Now, anyone who believes the Democrats' story that Russia blew up its own infrastructure, I can't help you. It's complete nonsense. We know who did it. The Democrats said they were going to do it. They said they were going to do it. They repeated it, and then it happened. Then they denied it. So worldwide opinion is that the Democrats did it. That's why the Texas Democrats don't want to talk about it. And what I'm attempting to tell you right now is that the greatest act of terrorism was conducted potentially by our own political party. Our own political party launched an offensive attack on a precious resource of a sovereign nation. And Texas Democrats don't want to talk about that. And that act was the greatest act of environmental terrorism since 9/11. Okay, Texas Democrats don't want to talk about that. So when Gina Hinojosa talks about how Democrats are bringing you a livable planet, how long are you going to eat this nonsense? How long? It's time to confront our Texas Democrats. Guys, we got through one half of Gina Hinojosa's speech at the Texas Democrat Party's annual convention, and it's filled from end to end with nothing but nonsense and nothing but things that are here to harm you, your families, your way of life, your wealth, your quality of life. And so it's time for us to get politically active. Get politically active. Call these state reps. Tell them what you think. Set them straight. They can't do it if their phones are ringing around the clock with Texans telling them the truth. They cannot do it. They can't. Set an appointment with these Texas Democrats. Ask to see your representatives. Sit down with them. See how quickly they exit the conference room when you present them with facts. But see, what happens when you take this level of activism is you see Democrats for their lifetime, they've been on offense. They're not used to being on defense. And they are paper thin deep. They're paper thin deep. They act like the intellect. They're not intellects. They're surface level intellects. With a quick perusing of the facts, they go away. Okay? And so what I'm trying to tell you is that if we bring this level of activism to our Texas Democrats, what happens is they don't want to get up in the morning. They can't launch a campaign. They can't launch a fraud effort. Their staff begins to resent them. The staff doesn't want to pick up the phone calls, and they implode. Okay? We have to save our state. We have to save our country. Unfortunately, this is on our watch. The men before us did it with bigger challenges, bigger events. They laid the foundation so that now all we have to do is simply become politically active. And this is the Chris Heasley Show, and we will be back here next. I want to thank G2 for all your quality content.
Thank you for allowing me to join.
We will be back here